The crystalline halls of the Zenthri Imperial Palace echoed with the soft chiming of gravity stabilizers as Princess Lyralii glided through the corridors. Her iridescent blue skin caught the artificial sunlight streaming through the bioglass windows, and her forearms moved gracefully as she reviewed the morning reports on her neural interface. As the youngest daughter of Emperor Vexthal, she had grown accustomed to a life of luxury and protection, surrounded by the finest warriors in the galaxy. The Zenthri Empire stretched across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy, encompassing over 10,000 worlds. Their military might was legendary, their technology advanced beyond most species' comprehension. Princess Lyralii had never known fear, never experienced genuine danger. The palace guards were elite Zenthri warriors, each standing 9 feet tall with thick chitinous armor and plasma weapons that could level city blocks. When her father announced that a new security detail would be assigned to her, she barely paid attention. The emperor explained that threats from rival empires had increased, and additional protection was deemed necessary. Lyralii simply nodded, assuming another squad of towering Zenthri veterans would join her entourage. She was therefore quite surprised when she met Marcus Chen for the first time. The human stood barely 6 feet tall, appearing almost fragile next to her usual guardians. His dark hair was unremarkable, his brown eyes seemed ordinary, and his build was lean rather than imposing. He wore simple gray clothing that looked more like a maintenance uniform than military gear. No visible weapons, no armor plating, no intimidating presence whatsoever. "This is your new trainee guard," announced Captain Zethkar, her head of security. The massive Zenthri warrior gestured dismissively toward Marcus. "The Terran exchange program requires us to accept 1 human for training purposes. Consider it a diplomatic formality." Princess Lyralii studied the human with barely concealed disappointment. She had heard of the Terran species, of course. They were relatively new to galactic politics, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 2 centuries ago. Their technology was primitive compared to the Zenthri, their worlds were few, and their military seemed laughably small. The idea that this unremarkable creature could provide any meaningful protection was almost insulting. Marcus stepped forward and bowed slightly, a gesture that seemed quaint and outdated. "Your Highness, I'm honored to serve in your security detail." His voice was calm and respectful, but Lyralii detected no fear or awe. Most species trembled in the presence of Zenthri royalty. Humans, apparently, lacked proper reverence. She sighed internally and decided to make the best of an awkward situation. "Very well," she replied coolly. "Try to keep up and stay out of the way." Over the following days, Marcus seemed to confirm every expectation of human inadequacy. He carried no visible weapons while her other guards bristled with plasma rifles and energy shields. He moved quietly through the palace, observing everything but saying little. During training exercises, he couldn't match the speed or strength of the Zenthri warriors. He appeared to be exactly what Captain Zethkar had described, a diplomatic trainee learning the basics of royal protection. Lyralii found his presence mildly irritating. During formal ceremonies, he stood at the back of her guard formation, looking entirely out of place. When she attended diplomatic functions, he seemed more interested in studying the other species present than focusing on potential threats. His questions about palace security seemed naive, and his suggestions were politely dismissed by the veteran guards. The princess began to wonder why the Terran government had sent such an unremarkable representative. Surely they had more impressive specimens among their military ranks. Perhaps this Marcus Chen was simply a bureaucrat's son, placed in a safe position to gain experience and political connections. 3 weeks into his assignment, Lyralii had grown so accustomed to ignoring the human that she nearly forgot he existed. The real guards handled all security matters, the palace routine continued smoothly, and Marcus remained a quiet shadow in the background. She had no idea that everything was about to change. The first sign of trouble came during a routine diplomatic reception. Ambassador Crixtel from the Hegemony Worlds was visiting to discuss trade agreements, accompanied by his usual retinue of advisors and bodyguards. The evening proceeded normally until Lyralii noticed something odd in Marcus's behavior. The human had positioned himself near the main entrance, his eyes constantly scanning the crowd. His posture had changed subtly, becoming more alert and focused. For the first time since his arrival, he looked like he was actually taking his security duties seriously. Lyralii was about to ask him what he had noticed when the lights went out. Emergency lighting bathed the diplomatic hall in an eerie red glow as chaos erupted around Princess Lyralii. Screams echoed off the crystal walls as delegates dove for cover behind overturned tables. The massive Zenthari guards immediately formed a protective circle around her, their plasma weapons charging with ominous whines. Through the confusion, dark shapes descended from ventilation shafts in the ceiling. Lyraliai's blood went cold as she recognized the sleek, predatory forms of Voidstalkers, assassins from the Shadow Collective, the most feared criminal organization in the galaxy. These weren't random attackers. They were professional killers whose success rate was legendary. Voidstalkers stood 8 feet tall, their bodies covered in adaptive camouflage that made them nearly invisible. Razor-sharp claws extended from their hands, and their elongated skulls housed brains capable of calculating kill trajectories in microseconds. They moved with supernatural grace, their technology allowing them to phase in and out of normal spacetime. Captain Zefkar roared orders as his warriors opened fire. Plasma bolts streaked across the hall, but the Voidstalkers seemed to anticipate every shot. They flickered in and out of visibility, appearing behind guards only to vanish again before return fire could connect. One by one, the elite Zenthari warriors began falling. Princess Lyraliai watched in growing horror as her supposedly invincible protectors were systematically eliminated. These assassins were operating on a level far beyond normal military engagement. They weren't just skilled fighters, they were apex predators specifically designed for killing royalty. In the midst of the battle, she suddenly realized that Marcus had disappeared. The human who had seemed so unremarkable, so out of place among her guards, was nowhere to be seen. Lyraliai felt a stab of disgust, assuming he had fled at the first sign of danger. Typical human cowardice, she thought bitterly. When real threats appeared, their primitive species showed their true nature. A Voidstalker materialized directly in front of her, its claws gleaming in the emergency lighting. Captain Zefkar was down, his plasma rifle scattered across the floor. The remaining guards were too far away to intervene. The assassin's head tilted as it studied her, calculating the most efficient method of execution. Princess Lyraliai closed her eyes and prepared for death. The killing blow never came. Instead, she heard a sound that would haunt her dreams for years to come, the wet, tearing noise of claws being forcibly removed from living tissue. Her eyes snapped open to see the Voidstalker staggering backward, a confused expression on its predatory features. Marcus stood behind the assassin, holding something that dripped dark fluid. The object in his hands looked like advanced technology, but unlike anything in the Zenthari military database. As Lyraliai watched in shock, she realized he had somehow torn the Voidstalker's primary weapon systems directly from its body. The assassin spun to face this new threat, but Marcus was already moving. His speed was impossible, faster than Zenthari reflexes, faster than the Voidstalker's enhanced nervous system could track. He flowed around the creature's desperate swipes like water, each movement precise and economical. What followed wasn't a fight. It was a demonstration. Marcus dismantled the Voidstalker with mechanical efficiency. Every strike targeted critical nerve clusters, every movement exploited anatomical weaknesses that shouldn't have been known to humans. The assassin's adaptive camouflage flickered and failed as its systems shut down one by one. The remaining Voidstalkers in the hall suddenly stopped their attacks on the Zenthari guards. Their elongated heads turned toward Marcus with an expression Lyraliai had never seen on their species before: recognition and fear. One of the assassins made a sound that could only be described as a whimper. In their harsh, clicking language, it spoke a single word that sent chills through every alien present: Deathworlder. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Voidstalkers, who moments before had been systematically eliminating elite warriors, began retreating toward the exits. Their movements were no longer graceful and predatory. They scrambled with desperate urgency, like prey animals fleeing from something far more dangerous than themselves. Marcus watched them go with calm, dark eyes. He made no move to pursue, simply stood in the center of the hall as the most feared assassins in the galaxy fled from his presence. Blood dripped from his hands, not his own, but that of creatures who had been considered unkillable. Princess Lyraliai stared at the human in shock and growing understanding. The diplomatic trainee, the unremarkable guard who had seemed so out of place among her elite protectors, was something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Captain Zefkar, struggling to his feet despite his injuries, looked at Marcus with new respect and terror. "What are you?" he whispered. Marcus turned toward the princess, his expression returning to the same calm, respectful demeanor she had grown used to over the past weeks. "Just a human, Your Highness. Nothing more." But Lyralii was beginning to understand that when it came to humans, nothing more might be the most terrifying phrase in the galaxy. The word Death Worlder echoed in her mind as emergency medical teams rushed into the hall. She had heard the term before in military briefings, always dismissed as exaggeration or alien superstition. Now, watching Marcus calmly clean his hands while Voidstalker corpses lay scattered around him, she realized that some legends might be more accurate than anyone had dared believe. The encrypted files arrived at Princess Lyralii's personal terminal 3 hours after the attack. Captain Zethkar, his arm in a regeneration sleeve and, his pride severely wounded, had requested a complete intelligence briefing on Marcus Chen from the Galactic Information Network. What Lyralii discovered made her hands tremble as she read through classified document after classified document. Earth, the human homeworld, wasn't just another developing civilization. It was classified as a Level 10 Death World, the highest rating on the galactic danger scale. Most sentient species evolved on garden worlds with stable climates, manageable predators, and reasonable environmental challenges. Humans had evolved in what amounted to a planetary-scale nightmare. Earth's gravity was nearly double that of most inhabited worlds. Its weather systems included phenomena that could level cities. The planet was riddled with active volcanoes, unstable tectonic plates, and radiation levels that would kill most aliens within hours. But the environmental hazards were nothing compared to the native life forms. The intelligence files described creatures that seemed impossible: land predators weighing several tons that could run at highway speeds, aerial hunters with reflexes measured in microseconds, aquatic killers with bite forces that could crush starship hulls. Earth's ecosystem was essentially a multi-billion-year arms race where only the most efficient killers survived. And humans had not just survived in this environment. They had thrived. The files detailed human physiology with clinical precision, but the numbers read like science fiction to Lyralii's eyes. Bone density 3 times galactic average. Muscle fiber efficiency that allowed sustained performance under extreme stress. A cardiovascular system capable of delivering oxygen at rates that would cause heart failure in most species. Reflexes honed by millions of years of facing death on a daily basis. But the most disturbing section dealt with human psychology. Humans, the report explained, had evolved a unique trait called persistence hunting. While other Earth predators relied on speed or strength for quick kills, humans had developed the ability to simply outlast their prey. They could track a target for days or weeks, never stopping, never tiring, until their quarry collapsed from exhaustion. This had created a species with an almost supernatural ability to focus on long-term goals despite immediate obstacles. The psychological profile included a warning that had been flagged by every major military intelligence service in the galaxy: humans do not retreat when facing superior force. Their evolutionary programming compels them to fight until either they are dead or their enemies are eliminated. This makes them extremely dangerous when cornered and explains their rapid military success despite technological disadvantages. Princess Lyralii scrolled through dozens of military engagement reports. Human forces consistently won battles against superior numbers and technology through tactics that other species considered suicidal. They would charge directly into overwhelming firepower, absorb casualties that would break any other army, and continue fighting until victory was achieved. The files included testimony from veterans of various species who had fought alongside humans. A Zen-3 general wrote, "I watched a human soldier continue fighting with injuries that should have killed him 3 times over. He eliminated an entire enemy squad while bleeding out, then asked for ammunition before medical attention. They are not normal." A hegemony admiral reported, "Human boarding parties are the most terrifying phenomenon in modern warfare. They move through our ships like a plague, appearing from impossible angles, using our own systems against us. We have learned to surrender rather than face human boarders in close combat." But perhaps most disturbing was a report from a Voidstalker commander, the same species that had fled the palace in terror. Humans fight like the apex predators of their homeworld because they are the apex predators of their homeworld. Every other species on their planet learned to fear them. We were fools to think we would be different. Lyralii discovered that the human military ranking system was deliberately misleading to other species. What humans called trainees or basic infantry were actually elite soldiers by galactic standards. Their special forces were considered mythical by most alien militaries, warriors so dangerous that engagement protocols recommended immediate retreat rather than direct confrontation. Marcus Chen's file was mostly classified, but what she could access painted a picture that made her blood run cold. He wasn't just a diplomatic trainee. He was a veteran of the Terran Space Marines, a unit that existed specifically to handle situations too dangerous for regular human forces. His official designation was Hazardous Environment Specialist, which apparently meant he was trained to fight and kill in conditions that would be lethal to most life forms. The file noted that he had volunteered for the diplomatic assignment as a rest posting after completing 3 consecutive deep space missions. Lyralii realized that what humans considered a relaxing break from their normal duties involved protecting alien royalty from the galaxy's most dangerous assassins. She found a video log recorded by a Zenthari diplomat who had witnessed human soldiers in action during a border conflict. The official spoke in hushed, frightened tones. "They don't fight like civilized beings. They fight like the monsters from children's stories, like the ancient predators our species forgot to fear. I understand now why the old myths speak of demons and devils. They were warnings about humans." As Princess Lyralii absorbed this information, she began to understand the true nature of her situation. The Terran exchange program wasn't about learning alien military techniques. It was about demonstrating human capabilities to potential enemies. Every human trainee placed in foreign militaries was actually a walking advertisement for why war with Earth was a catastrophic idea. The Zenthari Empire, despite all its power and technology, had unknowingly invited one of the galaxy's most dangerous predators into their palace. And that predator had been quietly observing their defenses, their protocols, their capabilities for weeks. Marcus Chen hadn't been learning how to protect royalty. He had been learning how to eliminate them. The terrifying realization struck her that if the human had been an enemy agent, she would have been dead long before the Void Stalkers arrived. Her elite guards, her advanced security systems, her palace full of warriors, none of it would have mattered against something that evolution had spent millions of years perfecting as a killing machine. A soft chime indicated someone was requesting entry to her chambers. Princess Lyralii looked up to see Marcus standing at her door, still wearing his simple gray uniform, still appearing completely unremarkable. "Your Highness," he said with the same respectful tone he had always used. "Captain Zefkar asked me to check on your security arrangements for tomorrow's council meeting." She stared at him, seeing him clearly for the first time. This wasn't a trainee or a diplomat. This was Earth's ultimate predator, politely asking about her schedule while the blood of professional assassins still stained his memory. "Of course," she managed to reply, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Please, come in." As Marcus entered her chambers, Princess Lyralii realized that everything she thought she knew about the galaxy had been wrong. Princess Lyralii found herself studying Marcus with new eyes over the following days. Every casual movement now seemed deliberate and calculated. When he walked through the palace corridors, she noticed how his path always provided multiple escape routes and optimal sightlines. When he stood during formal functions, his positioning allowed him to observe every entrance and exit simultaneously. The subtle details she had previously dismissed as human awkwardness now revealed themselves as professional competence. Marcus never stood with his back to doorways. His hands remained free even during meals. He positioned himself to protect not just her direct person, but to control access to her location from any direction. Most disturbing was the realization that he had been quietly mapping the entire palace. What she had interpreted as curious sightseeing was actually a systematic intelligence-gathering operation. Marcus knew the location of every security sensor, every emergency system, every structural weakness in the building. Captain Zefkar seemed to share her newfound unease. The veteran warrior, whose confidence had been legendary throughout the Zenthari military, now moved carefully around the human. During briefings, he deferred to Marcus's suggestions with obvious reluctance. The man who had dismissed the human as a diplomatic formality now sought his approval for security arrangements. "Your Highness," Zefkar said during one morning briefing, "the human has recommended several modifications to our protection protocols." Princess Lyralii noticed that he no longer referred to Marcus by name, as if the word human had become a designation of rank rather than species. "What kind of modifications?" Marcus stepped forward, his manner still respectful but somehow more commanding than before. "The Void Stalker attack revealed several vulnerabilities in your security arrangements, Your Highness. Your guards are excellent warriors, but they're trained for conventional warfare. Assassination attempts require different tactics." He gestured to a holographic display of the palace layout. "Current protocols assume that threats will come from outside the perimeter. But professional killers don't assault fortified positions directly. They infiltrate, they wait, they strike when defenses are relaxed. Lyralii watched as Marcus highlighted dozens of potential entry points she had never considered. Maintenance tunnels, diplomatic pouches, even the possibility of threats embedded within the palace staff themselves. His analysis was comprehensive and terrifying in its implications. Human military doctrine, Marcus continued, assumes that any position can be breached given sufficient time and resources. The goal isn't to create an impenetrable fortress. It's to ensure that even if defenses fail, critical assets can survive and strike back. The princess realized he was describing himself. Marcus wasn't just another layer of security. He was the final failsafe, the last line of defense when everything else had been stripped away. A weapon disguised as a protector, hidden among her guards until the moment when ultimate force became necessary. Over the next week, Marcus transformed the palace security from a static defense into something that resembled a trap. Guards were repositioned to funnel potential attackers into predetermined kill zones. Emergency protocols were modified to prioritize protection of the princess over preservation of the palace itself. Most importantly, Marcus established multiple contingency plans for situations where conventional security had completely failed. Princess Lyralii began to understand that humans didn't just fight differently than other species. They thought differently. Where Zenthari military planning focused on overwhelming force and technological superiority, human tactics assumed that overwhelming force would be used against them. They planned for worst-case scenarios and treated survival as a puzzle to be solved rather than a battle to be won. The difference became clear during a simulated attack exercise. Captain Zethkar arranged for elite palace guards to attempt a breach using non-lethal weapons, treating the exercise as a test of their new protocols. The Zenthari warriors approached the problem exactly as Lyralii expected. They analyzed the defenses, identified weak points, and coordinated a direct assault using superior numbers and firepower. It was textbook military strategy, executed with professional competence. Marcus defeated them in under 3 minutes. He didn't meet their assault head-on or attempt to outgun superior numbers. Instead, he disappeared into the palace infrastructure, using maintenance corridors and emergency systems to strike from unexpected angles. The attacking guards found themselves isolated and eliminated one by one, never able to coordinate their superior firepower. When the exercise ended, Captain Zethkar stared at the tactical display in silent shock. "How did you know our approach vectors?" Marcus cleaned his training weapons with casual efficiency. "I didn't need to know your specific plan. I just needed to understand how Zenthari warriors think. Your species values honor and direct confrontation. You attack problems with strength and coordination. Humans learned long ago that strength can be turned against itself." "But our tactics are proven effective," Zethkar protested. "The Zenthari Empire has conquered thousands of worlds using these strategies." "Against other honorable species, yes," Marcus agreed. "But assassination isn't about honor. It's about killing efficiently and escaping quickly. Professional killers don't care about military tradition or battlefield ethics. They care about completing their mission and staying alive." Princess Lyralii watched the exchange with growing fascination. Marcus wasn't insulting Zenthari military doctrine, he was explaining why it was inadequate for certain types of threats. His analysis was clinical and respectful, but it contained an implicit warning that chilled her blood. If humans could defeat Zenthari tactics so easily in a training exercise, what would happen in actual warfare? That evening, she asked Marcus directly about human military capabilities. They were alone in her private study, reviewing security reports, when curiosity finally overcame diplomatic prudence. "The files say that humans fight in ways other species consider impossible," she said carefully. "What does that mean?" Marcus paused in his work, considering his response. "Most species fight to win, Your Highness. Humans fight to survive. The difference changes everything about tactics and strategy." "I don't understand the distinction." "When you fight to win, you calculate acceptable losses and strategic advantages. You retreat when victory becomes impossible. You surrender when defeat is certain." Marcus looked directly at her, his dark eyes holding depths she hadn't noticed before. "Humans don't have that luxury. On Earth, defeat means death. Our evolution didn't allow for strategic retreats or honorable surrender." He gestured toward the window, where stars glittered in the alien sky. Every other species in the galaxy evolved with natural predators that were stronger, faster, or more numerous. But they also evolved with escape options. Hiding places, allies, ways to avoid total destruction. Humans didn't? Humans were the thing other species hid from, Marcus said simply. We were the apex predator on a planet full of apex predators. The only way to survive was to be more dangerous than everything else. Princess Lyralii felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. And, now you're among the stars. Marcus nodded slowly. And, now we're among the stars. The conversation ended there, but its implications kept the princess awake long into the night. She was beginning to understand that the Terran exchange program might not be about diplomacy at all. It might be humanity's way of introducing themselves to the galaxy, one carefully placed demonstration at a time. The second attack came exactly 2 months after the first, during a state dinner honoring the ambassador from the Crystalline Confederacy. This time, Princess Lyralii was ready for it. She had learned to read the subtle changes in Marcus's behavior that indicated incoming danger. The slight shift in his posture, the way his eyes tracked movement patterns, the almost imperceptible tension that preceded action. When she saw these signs during the formal dinner, she didn't panic. She simply prepared herself to witness something that would redefine her understanding of warfare. The attackers were different this time. Instead of void stalkers, they faced quantum wraiths, energy beings from the nebula reaches who could phase through solid matter at will. These weren't mere assassins, they were living weapons created specifically to eliminate targets that conventional killers couldn't reach. Quantum wraiths existed partially outside normal spacetime, making them nearly impossible to detect until they struck. They could walk through walls, ignore energy shields, and phase in and out of reality to avoid return fire. Previous attempts to kill wraiths had required planet-killing weapons or reality-warping technology. The palace's advanced sensor systems detected nothing until the first sentry guard simply ceased to exist. One moment he was standing at attention, the next, he had been reduced to scattered atoms by forces beyond conventional understanding. Princess Lyralii watched in horror as her protectors died without even seeing their killers. Plasma weapons fired uselessly at empty air while more guards vanished in flashes of quantum energy. The wraiths were methodically eliminating every living being in the dining hall, working their way toward her with inexorable efficiency. Marcus stood calmly beside her chair, apparently unconcerned by enemies that could ignore every known defense. As a quantum wraith materialized directly in front of them, its energy form crackling with lethal potential, the humans simply reached into his jacket and withdrew something that shouldn't have existed. The device in his hand looked like a modified neural disruptor, but its energy signature was unlike anything in the Zen3 technology database. When Marcus activated it, reality itself seemed to twist around the quantum wraith. The energy being suddenly became solid, its otherworldly nature stripped away by technology that violated several fundamental laws of physics. Quantum phase stabilizer, Marcus explained casually as he dispatched the now vulnerable wraith with clinical efficiency. Human scientists have been studying dimensional beings for decades. We got tired of enemies we couldn't shoot back at. The remaining wraiths found themselves facing the same impossible situation. Their greatest advantage, the ability to exist outside normal spacetime, had been neutralized by human technology that shouldn't have been possible. Suddenly, solid and vulnerable, they discovered that humans had contingency plans for every type of warfare. Marcus moved through the dining hall like a force of nature, eliminating quantum entities with weapons designed specifically for that purpose. But what truly terrified Princess Lyralii wasn't his efficiency in combat. It was the realization that humanity had been preparing for this exact scenario. The quantum phase stabilizer wasn't a prototype or experimental technology. It was standard equipment for human soldiers, carried as routinely as ammunition or medical supplies. This meant that humans had already encountered quantum wraiths in combat, studied their capabilities, and developed countermeasures as a matter of course. When the last wraith fell, Marcus calmly reloaded his weapons and checked for additional threats. The dining hall was filled with the corpses of creatures that most species considered unkillable, but he treated it as routine maintenance. Captain Zethkar, who had survived both attacks despite serious injuries, looked at the human with something approaching religious awe. "What else are your people prepared for?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "Everything, Captain. Humans don't enter conflicts unless we've already planned for every possible escalation. We assume our enemies will use their most dangerous weapons, deploy their most exotic technologies, and attempt their most desperate tactics. But how can you prepare for everything?" "Because we've fought everything," Marcus replied simply. Earth's ecosystem produced every type of threat that evolution could devise. Humans learned to survive against overwhelming odds, superior technology, and impossible enemies. When we reached the stars and encountered new forms of warfare, we applied the same principles. Princess Lyralii understood now why the Void Stalkers had fled at the sight of a single human. It wasn't just fear of Marcus individually. It was recognition that behind every human stood an entire species that had been preparing for galactic warfare since before they learned to build starships. Over the following days, intelligence reports began arriving from across the galaxy. Other species were sharing their experiences with humans in combat, and the picture that emerged was both fascinating and terrifying. Humans didn't just adapt to alien warfare techniques, they improved upon them. Technologies that other species had spent millennia perfecting were analyzed, reverse-engineered, and enhanced by human scientists in a matter of years. Tactical doctrines that had remained unchanged for thousands of years were being revolutionized by humans who approached warfare as a problem to be solved rather than a tradition to be followed. The reports described human forces defeating enemies with superior numbers through tactics that seemed impossible. Human ships outmaneuvering faster vessels by predicting their movements. Human soldiers surviving in environments that should have been instantly lethal. Human commanders winning battles through strategies that other species literally couldn't conceive of. But, perhaps most disturbing was the discovery that humans were holding back. Marcus confirmed this during one of their security briefings. The forces deployed so far represent basic human military capabilities, Your Highness. Our standard infantry and conventional weapons. We haven't needed to deploy specialized units or advanced technologies for any galactic conflicts. What would require specialized deployment, she asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Threats that standard military doctrine can't handle, Marcus replied. Enemies that require more aggressive solutions. Princess Lyralii realized that the galaxy had been interacting with humanity's equivalent of a diplomatic corps. The humans who served in alien militaries, who participated in joint training exercises, who demonstrated their capabilities in limited conflicts, these were representatives, not warriors. The actual human military remained largely unseen, waiting behind the diplomats and exchange students like a hidden weapon. When she thought about the implications of this revelation, Princess Lyralii felt a chill that penetrated to her core. Marcus completed his assignment 2 weeks later, returning to Earth with commendations from the Zenthri Imperial Command. Princess Lyralii attended his departure ceremony, watching as the unremarkable human who had revolutionized her understanding of warfare boarded a simple transport ship. As the vessel disappeared into hyperspace, she realized that humanity had achieved something no other species in galactic history had managed. They had introduced themselves to the galaxy not through conquest or demonstration of power, but through quiet competence and carefully controlled displays of capability. Every species now knew that humans existed, that they were formidable, and that they were currently peaceful. But they also knew that crossing humanity would be the last mistake they ever made. The princess understood now that Marcus hadn't been a trainee at all. He had been a message, delivered personally to the Zenthri Empire and every other species watching their interactions. The message was simple: humans are here. They are watching. And they are ready for anything the galaxy might send against them. Standing alone in the palace courtyard, Princess Lyralii looked up at the stars and wondered what other surprises humanity had in store for the galaxy. She suspected that nobody, not even the humans themselves, fully understood the implications of Earth's children reaching the stars. But she was certain of one thing: the galaxy would never be the same.